used it for lots of members of the family and put all their bones in an ossuary. But what they did is it took at least 6 hours. It probably took a whole day. It took a lot of time. So with Lazarus, when he died, they took, 6, 12 hours, and they wrapped him up in myrrh and aloes, all this ointment and all these bandages, and it took a long, long time. But because Jesus died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and Passover started at 6 o'clock, they had to get everything done and dusted, and there wasn't time. That's why they used this special piece of, this special, unique, this didn't happen normally. This is why they use this special Shroud of Turin. It's called a sindon or an athonia. People who study the shroud are called syndonologists because of that Greek word, syndon. Okay, that's why.
So what about the face cloth, though?
Well, the face cloth, as I said, that's actually, the face cloth, the Sudarim, is in Oviedo in Spain. And that's been extensively researched, and we know that syndon, we know that it was taken there by early Christians. It's locked in a wooden cabinet, and in fact, the people of Oviedo say they know what all the fuss is about. They say, well, if we know the syndon comes from the same person as the Shroud of Turin, the type of blood is type AB, all the blood markings are exactly the same, it was on the same face. So why do people think that the shroud could possibly be 1325 when we know that this piece of cloth was on the same face? And we know the history of this piece of cloth. It definitely came to Spain in 1628.
Wonderful.
There we go.
Now tell us, what research can you actually tell us, to prove that the shroud is a 1st century cloth from Jerusalem?
Well, thanks. That's a really, really good question. Well, we need to look at the pictures again. Historical authenticity of the Shroud of Turin, well, it definitely is authentic. It's a piece of cloth, 14 foot long, 3 foot wide, roughly. And it's a man who's been really severely crucified. Now, there's the world expert on ancient textiles. Her name is, first to put my glasses on, Mechtilde Fleury Lemberg. And she works out of the famous museum in Switzerland's Abegg Foundation Textile Museum, and she is the world authority on ancient textiles. And this is what she says. She says this is definitely a 1st century piece of cloth. It has distinctive, exceptionally fine quality Z twist. It has a 3/1 herringbone pattern, a very distinctive joining seam. She says it's a very, very precious piece of ancient linen. And she says, actually, she's certain of this because it comes from, she said it comes from a Syrian or an Egyptian loom. And what's more that this material, identical material, probably woven on the same loom, is found in Masada. Have you been to Masada, Yemi?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, up in Masada, they found identical cloth, probably hand woven on the same loom. So she's absolutely convinced that this is a 1st century cloth. So there we have the world expert on ancient textiles says this is a 1st century cloth. We'll move on a little bit to this picture. Now, here is what's called the Hungarian Prague Codex manuscript. It's basically a parchment, and it's dated 1192. And basically, on the left there, you can see little poker holes. Well, there you can see those on the actual shroud. So we know that whoever drew, it's not a photograph, they didn't have cameras. Whoever drew the Hungarian, it's a manuscript in Hungary, in 1192, actually did it direct from the Shroud of Turin. So there we are. Let's move on now. Now this Dame Isabel Pixek, she's a Nobel Prize winner, by the way, and she's very, very highly acclaimed, and she's a Nobel Prize winner. We're going to come to her again because she's a physicist as well. But anyway, she says this is definitely not a painting. This is a most unusual thing, but there's no paint on it and all sorts of technical things we haven't got time to go into. And what's more, there are coins over those eyes. Now, actually, in our church, there's a lady there called Margaret. And when she started off nursing, when somebody died, they used to put little coins over the eyes to keep the eyelids shut. They don't do it anymore, but that's what they did when she started to train as a nurse, and that was not that long ago. Well, that's not what they did with Jesus. Well, those coins were minted by Pontius Pilate. They got coins dated AD 29 over the eye sockets of the Shroud of Turin. Just look at those pictures there. Over the eyes are those eye sockets. They're put over the eyes to keep the eyelids shut. And this guy is an emeritus professor in California. And he's done a lot of research. I haven't got time to go into it now. But there are two separate coins, both dated AD 29 by Pontius Pilate. We all know who Pontius Pilate is. So the coins date the shroud for AD 29. I believe Jesus was crucified AD 33. Some people think it was AD 30, but I think it was AD 33. But anyway, they put these little coins, and they're two separate coins, both minted AD 29. So there's one more. And then they found pollen on the shroud, Yemi. On the shroud, they found all this pollen, which comes from Jerusalem at the time of Passover. And not just a few pollen, lots and lots and lots of it. This is Dr. Max Fryer in the picture. He's a botanist and a Swiss criminologist. Basically helped policemen to solve murder cases. Anyway, he did lots and lots of research when he was working for STIRP, that's the Shroud of Turin research project. And also, this is the Dr. Danin, who's a botany professor at Hebrew University, and Dr. Yuri Baruch, who's a pollen specialist at the Israel Antiquities Authorities. Then there's a German physics teacher called Oskar Schurman, and Dr. Wanger again. And they've all done all this research, and I won't go through it because it's quite involved. But anyway, this is basically what Professor Danin, who's the current botany professor, says. This combination of flowers can be found in only one region in the world. The evidence clearly points to the floral grouping from the areas surrounding Jerusalem. So we know that the shroud was at one time in Jerusalem. And what else? It's not just that, there's a lot more. There's dirt on the shroud. You see, Jesus fell when he was carrying that heavy patibulum, and he got some of the dirt off the road on his nose and on his left kneecap. And that dirt is special dirt because it's only found in Jerusalem, in ancient tombs. That's the only place on the planet they know where it is. And these guys, they researched it. I won't go through all their names because of time. By the way, there's a free DVD the viewers can get hold of with all this stuff told in detail but much more slowly. And they're saying that this shroud was definitely in Jerusalem, and this particular dirt only comes from Jerusalem. So there we are. One more thing is this shroud has been researched by so many people, and it's been particularly researched by Dr. Robert Bucklin, who's a forensic pathologist in Los Angeles. And by the way, he's a very senior forensic pathologist, and he's done over 25,000 postmortems. They call them autopsies, all right? And basically, I won't go through all the details, but I can tell you a little bit. He says there are puncture wounds in his wrists and his feet, puncture wound injuries to his head, multiple trauma, whip-like injuries all over his back, post-mortem puncture injury to the right chest wall. And then he goes on, he says, there's only one person in the whole of history who fulfills this, and that person is Jesus Christ. This is a very, very senior forensic pathologist. Wow.
Wow, wow, wow. This is serious.
Yes.
And you said you've been actually interested in the Shroud of Turin for the past 36 years.
Yes, but you know, it took me 32 years to work it out, how that image got there. We haven't got to that yet.
So what more can you tell us about this shroud and what may be seen on it?
Okay, well, let's have a look now. Now, we definitely need to look at the photographs now. First of all, we can see the marks of the scourging. Now, Jesus was actually, normally people were scourged 39 times, but actually poor Jesus, he had 120 lashings, and each of those lashings with a Roman flagrum had 3 of those whips on it. And there are actually all these scourge marks from 2 separate soldiers all over his body. I don't know if you can see there on the right, all those scourge marks all over his back, all the way down his leg, all the way over his chest and the front of his legs. Basically, it says in the book of Isaiah, it says that he was unrecognizable on the cross.
Yeah.
Just terrible. Then we can see the evidence of the crown of thorns on the face. Can you see that picture with the blood tracking down from the crown of thorns? From the lote bush, very nasty, spiky things, and they were growing all over the praetorium, where Jesus was bullied basically by the soldiers. Then you can make out the fractured nasal cartilages. You can see that his nose is actually bent. Then you can see the image of the nailing of the hands. Now, in all medieval pictures, basically you always see that the nails go through the wrist, through the palm of the hand, but in this case, it actually goes through the wrist, and that's really important because Leonardo da Vinci or anybody else wouldn't have known that. It actually goes through the wrist. And that actually is the position with Jesus on the cross. So he didn't die with his hands, with the back of his hands against the cross. No, he died with the palm of his hands against the cross, as in that picture, which was drawn by my daughter, by the way.